If the 2020s are marked by information overload, a move fast, break things mentality, and Sigma grindset culture, then German indie game dev Ralf Schadler has a response. Cozy building sim Open Land is poised to be a game that gently forces the player to slow down and do things one at a time while using a robot to clean up a polluted isometric environment. Ralph, also known as Chill Space Games, kindly gave me a Steam key for early access to the demo, which will be released for free on April 29th. So is this demo worth playing, and what does it mean for the full game? I want y'all to know up front that this is my honest take on this demo. No one is paying me for this video. Although I love supporting indie devs, I'm cognizant that not all games, indie or otherwise, are worth playing. On that note, one of my first thoughts when checking out this demo's Steam page and subsequently loading it up was its similarity to another highly popular eco-restoration game that is taking the cozy genre by storm right now. Clearly, Open Land lacks the trademark pocket monsters and their special abilities. It does feature a cutesy gameplay loop of human-free eco-restoration that leads to nature returning to this previously barren land, however. Even so, I don't think that Nintendo can claim the corner on a gameplay loop of if you build it, they will come. That's a hallmark feature of Roller Coaster Tycoon, SimCity 4, and countless other sandbox games. More specific to the post-apocalyptic theme, Fallout 4 features the restoration of an irradiated Boston. Plenty of other games like Ori and the Blind Forest, Cloud Gardens, and Terra Nil touch on elements of cataclysm, human-free environments, and eco-restoration. As someone who has made the financial decision not to buy a Switch 2 anytime soon and therefore hasn't played Pocopia, I can't speak to exactly how similar Pocopia and Open Land feel. I do know that the Switch 2's and Pocopia's combined high price makes indie games like Open Land an appealing option for those seeking a zen yet affordable experience. There isn't a price listed for the full version of Open Land yet. If the developer's other games on Steam are an indication, I would anticipate an $8 to $10 price tag. Digging into the demo further, the isometric, retro-inspired graphics made me think again of Roller Coaster Tycoon, and even of games like the original Sims and RuneScape. This lent the demo some familiarity, though it didn't feel ripped from any of these other titles. While the demo ran smoothly, a tribute to its small file size and modest graphical demands, there were some issues with mechanics and visuals. Clipping and movement or physics that just didn't quite make sense were pretty common. At one point, the robot at the center of the game would just clip through animals or get really close to them without spooking them. I don't expect a free demo of a small indie title to be perfect, but little tweaks here would make it more realistic and therefore immersive. That said, I could tell the developer put effort into making sure not every visual asset was identical, so that the player isn't left with a cookie-cutter landscape. Little elements like loose leaves blowing in the wind or a varied grass texture made the demo feel more alive too. Story-wise, the demo was more or less what you made of it. That's not uncommon for sandbox games. The barren environment, lack of humans, and certain item descriptions do give a post-apocalyptic feel, even if it's never directly addressed. The nature of the demo and its seeded spawning meant I wasn't necessarily looking for a deep story. I think it could be kind of cool to see more of a narrative in subtle items like descriptions, or the trash that the robot collects. This didn't feel necessary in the bite-sized demo though, and I don't think the full game will need it either. The design of the demo came across as a meditative, pensive, and ultimately introverted experience. Plenty of cozy building games will offer rich dialogue and gameplay dependent on building relationships with other characters. Open Land instead offers a quiet space for reflection. The primary gameplay loop consisted of collecting trash, light terraforming, and unlocking build features like trees and bee boxes, all for the sake of making a welcoming environment for animals. This was apparent from the demo Steam page and was an immediate hook. I appreciated the eco-centric nature of the demo, and not just in pandering to the renewable energy nerd in me. However simplistic, the demo alluded to the interconnected relationships of plants, animals, and even fungi. In reality, none of these creatures exist in a vacuum, and they all depend on each other. I think the variety of critters here was perfect for a demo, but I could imagine more options making the full game a more enticing repeat play. Visually, I thought the overall theme was well designed. The color palette was pleasing and coherent without being monochrome. The demo had its own sense of beauty and cuteness without needing a whole bunch of complex visual assets. The menus and UI were very friendly and calming, and it's clear from messing around in the settings that more gameplay will be available in the full version. The protagonist is a charming enough robot, made all the more appealing with delightful sound effects and interactions. I really appreciated that items that were scrapped for parts would explode in a comedic way. Even the music was whimsical and varied, though I thought the periods of silence between songs were overlong, and they made the demo feel empty at times. Despite a solid if modest premise and overall good execution, the demo did have some issues. I already mentioned the occasional goofy physics. No one problem here ruined the experience, but combined they were enough that I think the full game should have some of these ironed out before release. I thought it was a bit jarring that the robot could just traverse water like it's some kind of water-walking deity or something. Simple animations that change the vehicular design of the robot while it's on water, like what we see in Mario Kart, could fix this. There could also be an added terraforming option, like building a bridge to go over water. On that note, the terraforming mechanics were overly limited. Once a waterway was built, for example, there was no way of undoing it. The seeded hills that came built into the map also could not be altered in any way. These landscaping issues were exacerbated by larger mechanics problems. Despite trying every hotkey I could think of, the map didn't rotate. Map rotation is a pretty common capability in low graphical intensity isometric games, so this felt off. I get that rotation means that you typically have to quadruple your visual assets and physics to make them look normal from 4 different angles. Not having map rotation as an option feels hollow though. The lack of rotation extended to objects which were stuck in the perspective that they spawned in. I expect this from top-down oblique games like Stardew Valley, but not from isometric games like Open Land. Similarly, not having object transparency while also not having rotation meant that some parts of the map were just inaccessible. I was worried that there was trash behind hills or trees that I just couldn't see and therefore would have no way of collecting. That I couldn't move objects like solar panels or trees without scrapping them felt weird too. This last detail is maybe more realistic in some ways, but again, these are common mechanics that people will expect when playing games like this. Some other things I would like to see ironed out before full release include anchoring floating menus to the center of the screen and making edge scrolling at the bottom a little smoother. Overall, cleanup of these minor flaws would take this demo to the next level and make it all the more fun and immersive. There was one major flaw of the demo that gave me pause though, and I worry that it might exist in the full version as well. The pacing of the demo was incredibly fast. I felt like I was tearing through the 8 stages of the demo while accomplishing relatively little and still leaving whole areas of my map dirty and empty. I got through the whole demo in less than an hour and a half. That was with me being slower than normal because I was taking notes for this video. Again, this is a free demo. I wasn't expecting hours and hours of a fully fleshed out experience. I'm also glad that it's clear where and how the full version will offer more. But one really aggravating thing here was that when I got to stage 8 out of 8, so the final stage of the demo, it wouldn't allow me to play further. Even exiting to the main menu and returning would just trigger the stage 8 pop-up again. This was while there was still radioactive gunk in part of my map, and I hadn't placed all the trees and flowers that I wanted. I'm not asking for more content or features here, just no hard cap on how long I can play a seeded world for. Perhaps the full version will be slower paced or have more stages, but as is, this demo felt very truncated and in a really unnecessary way here. Simply making the stage 8 pop-up closable and removing any kind of trigger after stage 8 has already been completed would make this entire demo so much better. I worry that this hard cap might also be in the full version of the game, which would be such a bummer. Players should be allowed to keep tinkering in their individual worlds until they feel it's time to move on. The stage 8 pop-up really disrupted the otherwise zen feeling of the demo and left me wanting more. I realize that I've talked about the demo's flaws, and in kind of a granular way. I think games as small and simple as Open Land make any flaws, no matter how minor they are, stand out. And don't interpret small or simple here as a criticism. I like that this demo, and seemingly the game that it previews, stays in its lane. We all know that there are too many games out there that are overly ambitious. They promise too much and deliver too little. Open Land doesn't have that problem. The game hook is compelling enough as is. It doesn't need a bunch of fancy bells, whistles, or overproduced graphics to make it worth playing. It does need to be cleaned up, however, so that the straightforward premise of the game is as enjoyable as possible. If you're craving a calming and satisfying cozy gaming experience, I think the Open Land demo has a lot of what you're looking for. At a cost of literally $0, I think it's worth checking out. I'm curious to see how Ralph changes the game prior to its full launch, and I will definitely be keeping an eye on this one. Meanwhile, if there are cozy eco-restoration games that you know and love, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.